2 Kings. Chapter 8. Now Elisha had spoken to the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, Rise up, and you and your household go and dwell wherever you can, for Jehovah has called for a famine, and it will also come upon the land for 7 years. So the woman rose up and did according to the word of the man of God. And she and her household went and dwelt in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. And at the end of the 7 years the woman returned from the land of the Philistines. And she went forth to cry unto the king for her house and her land. And the king was talking to Gehazi the attendant of the man of God, saying, Recount to me all the great things that Elisha has done. And while Gehazi was telling the king how Elisha had restored the dead boy to life, there came the woman whose son he had restored to life, crying to the king for her house and her land. And Gehazi said, My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son whom Elisha restored to life. And the king asked the woman, and she recounted it to him. And the king appointed a certain officer for her, saying, Restore all that was hers and all the produce of her land from the day that she left the country until now. And Elisha went to Damascus. And Ben-Hadad the king of Syria was sick. And it was told him, saying, The man of God has come here. And the king said to Hazael, Take a gift with you, and go to meet the man of God, and inquire of Jehovah through him, saying, Will I recover from this sickness? So Hazael went to meet him, and he took a gift with him, even all good things of Damascus, 40 camel loads. And he came and stood before him and said, Your son Ben-Hadad the king of Syria has sent me to you, saying, Will I recover from this sickness? And Elisha said to him, Go and say to him, You shall certainly recover, however Jehovah has shown me that he shall certainly die. And he fixed his gaze and stared at him until he was ashamed. Then the man of God began to weep. And Hazael said, Why are you weeping, my lord? And he said, Because I know the evil that you will do to the children of Israel, their strongholds you will set on fire, and their choice young men you will slay with the sword, and their little ones you will dash to pieces, and their pregnant women you will rip open. And Hazael said, But what is your servant, who is but a dog, that he should do this great thing? And Elisha said, Jehovah has shown me that you will be king over Syria. And he went from Elisha and came to his master. And his master said to him, What did Elisha say to you? And he said, He told me that you shall certainly recover. But on the next day he took the heavy covering over Ben-Hadad and dipped it in water and spread it over his face, so that he died, and Hazael reigned in his place. Now in the 5th year of Joram the son of Ahab, the king of Israel, while Jehoshaphat was king of Judah, Jehoram the son of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, began to reign. He was 32 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. And he walked in the way of the kings of Israel and as the house of Ahab had done, for Ahab's daughter was his wife, and he did what was evil in the sight of Jehovah. But Jehovah would not destroy Judah, because of David his servant, as he had promised him that for his sake he would provide a lamp for his children always. In his days Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah, and they installed a king over themselves. So Joram crossed over to Zair, and all his chariots with him. And he rose up at night and struck the Edomites all around him and the captains of the chariots, but his people fled to their tents. So Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah, as it is to this day. Then Libnah revolted at the same time. And the rest of the acts of Joram and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Joram slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. And Ahaziah his son reigned in his place. In the 12th year of Joram the son of Ahab, the king of Israel, Ahaziah the son of Jehoram, the king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Athaliah, the daughter of Omri the king of Israel. And he walked in the way of the house of Ahab and did what was evil in the sight of Jehovah, like the house of Ahab, for he was a son-in-law to the house of Ahab. And he went with Joram the son of Ahab to fight with Hazael the king of Syria at Ramoth-Gilead. And the Syrians struck Joram. And Joram the king returned to heal in Jezreel of his wounds that the Syrians had inflicted on him in Ramah when he fought with Hazael the king of Syria. And Ahaziah the son of Jehoram, the king of Judah, went down to see Joram the son of Ahab in Jezreel, for he was sick. 2 Kings Chapter 9. And Elisha the prophet called one of the sons of the prophets and said to him, Gird up your loins, and take this flask of oil in your hand, and go to Ramoth-Gilead. And when you arrive there, look there for Jehu the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, and go in and make him rise up from among his brothers, and bring him to an inner room. Then take the flask of oil and pour it on his head and say, Thus says Jehovah, I have anointed you king over Israel. Then open the door and flee, and do not delay. So the young man, the prophet's attendant, went to Ramoth-Gilead. And when he came, there the captains of the army were sitting. And he said, I have a word for you, O captain. And Jehu said, To which one of all of us? And he said, To you, O captain. And he rose up and went into the house, and he poured the oil on his head and said to him, Thus says Jehovah the God of Israel, I have anointed you king over the people of Jehovah, over Israel. And you shall strike the house of Ahab your master, and I will avenge the blood of my servants the prophets and the blood of all the servants of Jehovah at the hand of Jezebel. And the whole house of Ahab will perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every male, bond and free, in Israel. And I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah. And the dogs shall eat Jezebel in the lot of Jezreel, and there will be none to bury her. Then he opened the door and fled. And when Jehu came out to the servants of his master, someone said to him, Is all well? Why did this mad fellow come to you? And he said to them, You know the man in his ranting. And they said, That is a lie, please tell us. And he said, Thus and thus he said to me, saying, Thus says Jehovah, I have anointed you king over Israel. Then they moved quickly, and every man took his garment and put it under him on the bare steps, and they blew the trumpet and said, Jehu is king. And Jehu the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Now Joram had been defending Ramoth-Gilead, he and all Israel, because of Hazael the king of Syria. But Jehoram the king returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Syrians had inflicted on him when he fought Hazael the king of Syria. And Jehu said, If this is your desire, let no fugitive depart from the city and go and tell it in Jezreel. So Jehu rode off in a chariot and went to Jezreel, for Joram was lying ill there. And Ahaziah the king of Judah had come down to see Joram. And the watchman stood on the tower in Jezreel and saw Jehu's multitude as he came, and he said, I see a multitude. And Jehoram said, Take a horseman, and send him to meet them, and let him say, Is there peace? So the horseman went to meet him and said, Thus says the king, Is there peace? And Jehu said, What do you have to do with peace? Turn behind me. And the watchman reported, saying, The messenger went to them but did not return. And he sent out a second horseman, and he came to them and said, Thus says the king, Is there peace? And Jehu said, What do you have to do with peace? Turn behind me. And the watchman reported, saying, He went to them but did not return, and the driving is like the driving of Jehu the son of Nimshi, because he drives furiously. And Jehoram said, Yoke the chariot. And someone yoked his chariot. And Jehoram the king of Israel and Ahaziah the king of Judah went out, each in his chariot, and went to meet Jehu, and they found him in the lot of Naboth the Jezreelite. And when Jehoram saw Jehu, he said, is there peace, Jehu? And he said, What peace can there be, so long as the harlotries and sorceries of Jezebel your mother are so many? And Jehoram turned the reins and tried to flee. And he said to Ahaziah, Treachery, Ahaziah. And Jehu drew his bow with full strength and struck Jehoram between his arms, and the arrow went through his heart, and he sank down in his chariot. And Jehu said to Bidkar his officer, Take him up, and throw him in the lot of the field of Naboth the Jezreelite, for remember how you and I were riding together behind Ahab his father, and Jehovah uttered this oracle against him. Surely I have seen the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons yesterday, declares Jehovah, and I will repay you in this lot, declares Jehovah. And now, take him up and throw him in the lot, according to the word of Jehovah. And Ahaziah the king of Judah saw this and fled toward the garden house, and Jehu pursued after him and said, Strike him too in his chariot. So they struck him at the ascent of Gur, which is by Ibleam. And he fled to Megiddo and died there. And his servants carried him in a chariot to Jerusalem and buried him in his grave with his fathers in the city of David. And in the 11th year of Joram the son of Ahab, Ahaziah began to reign over Judah. And Jehu came to Jezreel, and Jezebel heard of it. And she put paint on her eyes and adorned her head, and she looked out the window. And as Jehu entered the gate, she said, Is all well, Zimri, you murderer of your master? And he lifted up his face to the window and said, Who is on my side? Who? And 2 or 3 eunuchs looked out at him. And he said, Throw her down. And they threw her down. And some of her blood spattered on the wall and on the horses, and he trampled her. And he came in, and ate and drank, and said, Attend now to this cursed woman and bury her, for she is a king's daughter. But when they went to bury her, they found no more of her than her skull and her feet and the palms of her hands. And they returned and reported it to him. And he said, This is the word of Jehovah, which he spoke through his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, In the lot of Jezreel the dogs will eat the flesh of Jezebel. And the corpse of Jezebel will be like dung upon the surface of the field in the lot of Jezreel, so that they will not say, This is Jezebel.